Good morning, everybody. Distinguished speaker, Dr. Brian, Assistant Professor of Psychology at the University of Georgia, USA. Professors, Dean, Faculty of Health Sciences, Directors, fellow academic colleagues, non-academic colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the OUSL, I would like to express my sincere thanks to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Brian, for accepting our invitation. Also, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this third lecture of the third distinguished lecture series organized by the IRU in collaboration with the Department of Psychology and Counseling of the Faculty of Health Sciences, Center for Educational Technology and Media, and IT Department of the Open University of Sri Lanka. The Open University of Sri Lanka continuously engaging in establishing collaborative relationship to increase its international reputation, build its global profile, and conduct high-impact research. The distinguished lecture series organized by the OUSL intended to build capacities among Sri Lankan academics in good academic practices such as technology-assisted teaching, sound research methodologies, and high-impact publications. Today, we are happy that Dr. Brian is with us to deliver his distinguished lecture on Meeting of the Minds, a psychological perspective on culture and international education. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Dr. Ghani, the head Department of Psychology and Counseling, to introduce our distinguished lecture speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rajendra. My name is Dr. Ghani Tamaki. I'm the head of the Department of Psychology and Counseling at the Open University of Sri Lanka. I'm in honor to introduce our distinguished lecturer, Dr. Brian Haas. Dr. Brian Haas is an assistant professor of psychology at University of Georgia, USA. He is currently a Fulbright scholar teaching psychology in Kingdom of Bhutan. His primary goal in taking an active role in teaching psychology graduates is to utilize his research experience and teaching skills to the benefit of many graduates in countries like Bhutan, Costa Rica, and Tanzania. These international education study abroad programs are also related to the research he conducts in United States, which focuses on understanding individual differences in social and affective functioning in humans. The Gene Brain Social Behavior Lab that he leads in USA utilizes a multimodal approach which includes brain imaging, personality assessment, social behavioral experiments, and cultural assessments. His work on epigenetics and borderline personality disorder has gained wide media coverage and commentaries in US media. He began his career as an academic and a researcher in psychology at California State University, Hayward in 2002. This led to his MSc in psychology at Stony Brook University in New York, and from the same university, he obtained his PhD in biopsychology. His next step was gaining the postdoctoral fellowship from the Center for Interdisciplinary Brain Research Center at the prestigious Stanford University School of Medicine. Among the many accolades, Dr. Brian Haas has been a research associate of Stanford University in the past, and since 2012, he is an associate member of the Neuroscience Division, Biomedical and Health Sciences Institute at the University of Georgia, USA. His teaching experience spans from teaching modules such as introductory psychology to cross-cultural psychology, cognitive neuroscience, genetics of the human mind, biological basis of personality, and research methods in psychology. His publication list includes 36 journal articles in high-impact journals since 2004, and more than 30 published abstracts and posters in prestigious conferences and academic events. He has also served as an ad hoc journal reviewer for many of the esteemed journals in psychology, such as Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Cerebral Cortex, Journal of Neuroscience, Neuropsychopharmacology, among many others. With this brief note on his research and teaching career as a distinguished scholar in psychology, I would like to call Dr. Brian Haas to deliver his lecture on Meeting of the Minds, a Psychological Perspective on Culture and International Education. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's been a wonderful trip for me to be here, a wonderful visit that I've had so far, visiting the Open University of Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka in general. Thank you very much for all the kind welcoming that I've had. Today, I'd like to share with you some cross-cultural research, some findings of some research that I find particularly fascinating. I'd also like to share with you some of the current work that my team is involved with. And lastly, I'd like to finish with how we can use this information to better educate our students. So initially, we must ask each other the question, why? Why is this important to think about cultural research, cross-cultural psychology? Well, one is that in recent history, more people are moving across physical and cultural borders than any time in recent history. More people in this current day and age are finding themselves in scenarios that involve a different culture. May it be they're working with other people that are from different cultural backgrounds, or they're living in a society that is made up of a different cultural background than they were raised in. We can think about this in terms of internationalization or multiculturalism of many different facets of our society. For example, businesses are becoming more cultural and more international. Education centers, more students are choosing to go to different countries to receive their education. In addition, teachers, lecturers, professors are crossing borders to be able to provide and share their education. Non-governmental organizations are finding more and more opportunities to be able to be international in terms of their scope of their work. And lastly, there's some evidence that simply asking the question and seeking to understand the way that different people think and feel around the world from different cultural backgrounds may promote the development of openness to experience, empathy, theory of mind. And these skills are good skills to have in any scenario that we would find ourselves. And here's some data that shows some of this internationalization across the world. So here we see that in many different areas in the world, we see that in 2015 compared to 2000, more people are immigrating. More people are arriving, coming to these areas of the world than they were in the year 2000. They were crossing borders more. Within the United States, specifically, there's been an increase in immigration in recent years, particularly within the last 15 years. We can also look at the age range of people that are choosing to immigrate. So what we have here on the left side is the total population age demographic within the world. And we see that there's approximately 58% of that entire population that is of working age. On the other side, what we see here is the age demographic of people that are choosing to immigrate, to find them to cross borders. And here, there is a larger percentage of those people that are working age, a total of 72%. So the people that are choosing to cross borders and finding themselves in these cross-cultural scenarios are more likely to be in our workforce. Lastly, in terms of international education, here, this is a plot of data of international students, the amount of international students within the United States. So students that are coming from different countries to the United States to receive their education. You can see that there's this overall trend of an increased number of students. And lastly here, in terms of Sri Lanka and the United States, there's an increase in the number of immigrants that have come from Sri Lanka to the United States in recent years. So combined, there's reason for us to prepare our students to think about the multicultural issues, because they're going to be better prepared to be in the workforce. They're also going to be better prepared to be effective members within their college institution, because their college institution is becoming more multicultural. So as educators, it's advantageous for us to prepare our students to think about these issues and be able to be more effective when navigating cross-cultural issues. So a fundamental question in cross-cultural research is, how does culture influence the way people think about themselves and their relationships with other people? One distinction that's been made several times in cross-cultural research is this differentiation between relatively individualistic cultures and relatively collective cultures. Individualistic cultures stereotypically are United States, Western Europe. Collective cultures, representative societies are China, Korea. Some of the characteristics that differentiate individualistic cultures from collective cultures is this tendency to value the individual more than the in-group in individualistic cultures. So the individual, that's ourselves, and an in-group can be whatever group that we affiliate ourselves with. Some examples could be a particular sports team, your religious group, your family, your university, people within your same class, any group that you affiliate yourself with. And people in individualistic cultures tend to value the needs more of the individual compared to the needs of whatever that in-group is. That's in contrast to what we see in collective cultures, where people tend to value the needs of whatever in-group they are affiliated with more than their individual needs. Individualistic cultures tend to have more loosely defined in-groups. Loosely defined, so may it be a sports group, sports team, or a college, or a group of friends. People in individualistic cultures can affiliate with these groups, but they're relatively looser in terms of their definition. They can go from in-group to in-group and kind of affiliate with one for a few days, and then be able to affiliate with another group. So being able to come in and out of a particular in-group is relatively easy. You can come in for a few days or so, and then you can change. These are vague, can be vague and malleable, flexible. On the other hand, in collective cultures, there are fewer of these in-groups, but the ties that a person has to whatever in-group tend to be stronger. Clear cases with a family, strong relationships with the family that aren't flexible. That's your family, and it's very strong and not so flexible. Individualistic cultures tend to have less social support, while collective cultures have more social support. There's more competition in individualistic cultures relative to higher cooperation in collective cultures. And individualistic cultures tend to place a higher value on uniqueness, on standing out, on being different, versus the concept of conformity, which can be characterized with in a more negative way relative to collective cultures. In collective cultures, there's a higher value on harmony versus negatively perceiving the concept of deviance. So that brings us to this question of how do some of these characteristics affect the way that people see themselves and simply make decisions about all types of things. And so let's focus on this characteristic at the end, this high value on uniqueness versus this high value on harmony. Kim and Marcus performed this experiment where they aimed to try to understand this characteristic a bit better. And so here what we see, what Kim and Marcus did was recruit participants from two groups. One group were European Americans, another group were from East Asia. There were Chinese American children and Korean adults. And they were presented with these figures, these 4 figures, and you can see in each of the figures there are 9 sub-figures. And they were asked to complete this very simple task, where they were just asked to rank order, tell us which is your favorite in terms of the sub-figures within each of these figures. So each one has 9. So out of all of the 9, rank which one that you think is which one is your favorite, and then your second favorite. And the task is super open-ended, right? The researcher did not instruct the participant to use any particular criteria in order to rank order these subfigures. Simply very open-ended, tell us which of these subfigures you found more preferable to you. And what was compared, what the researcher was interested in, was how people from different cultural backgrounds preferred the either less frequently occurring or more frequently occurring subfigures. As you can see on the top 2 figures, there's one that stands out, that's different than all the other 9. And then on the bottom 2, there are 3 that are different than the rest of them. And so the question that was posed was, is there a difference, according to culture, in the preference of less frequently occurring subfigures? And this is what the researchers found, that indeed, in both 2 separate experiments where European Americans were used as the representative individualistic culture, and Chinese Americans or Koreans were used as the representative collective culture. What they found in both studies was that European Americans tended to prefer the less frequently occurring subfigure compared to the more frequently occurring subfigures. So this is pretty, I think, reflective of an overall tendency of ways that people prioritize either this tendency of uniqueness or this tendency of harmony. In another experiment, Kim and Marcus went to the San Francisco International Airport. And here at the airport, the researchers interacted with people that were arriving at that had come to the airport to fly to different parts of the world. So it provided this very good scenario to be able to perform cross-cultural research because people were going from coming in and out from all different parts of the world. And what they did here is they provided a survey to 56 people. 27 were European Americans and 29 were East Asians, Chinese and Korean. And after the survey was completed, the researcher reached into a bag and pulled out a group of 5 pens. And the pens were of 2 different colors. And as you can see, be it 5 pens, there was always a pen color that was less frequently occurring and a pen color that was more frequently occurring. And so the question here that was posed was the same in the prior experiment. Do people that were raised in different cultural backgrounds, do they prefer the infrequently occurring items, may them be pens in this scenario, differently according to which culture you come from? And here are the results that were in line with the previous experiment, that European Americans tended to prefer, they would pick the pen that was less frequently occurring compared to East Asians. So again, this provides support to this notion of different values that people across the world in individual and individualistic and collective cultures tend to place on this tendency to be different. And here we see these examples from these very kind of mundane tasks, this abstract figures and these pens, but it likely is representative of a whole lot of things the way that people make decisions in their social world. Another way that we can think about what may differentiate people around the world is this concept of subjective well-being or happiness, life satisfaction. And you may see that every few years there's some study that gets published in international news about we've just discovered the happiest country in the world, or here is the list of all of the order of how happy people are across the entire world. And so every few years this happens. And the approach that is typically used is to think about well-being, life satisfaction, happiness, using this theoretical approach. That includes life satisfaction, simply asking somebody, how satisfied are you with your life? The frequency of positive emotions and the infrequency of negative emotions. And here's an example of a specific question that has been used for one of these global level type studies. Imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom to 10 at the top. The top of the ladder represents the best possible life for you, and the bottom of the ladder represents the worst possible life for you. On which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel you stand at this time? And so using this approach, here are some of the countries that have frequently found themselves on the top of the list of happiest countries in the world: Denmark, Switzerland, Norway, Costa Rica, and Mexico. And some of the countries that frequently find themselves on the lower end of these lists include Zimbabwe, Sudan, Syria, Myanmar, and Egypt. Some researchers have gone on to try to investigate what are the characteristics of these countries that differentiate them to either be these very happy countries or these not happy countries. And there is some evidence that individualistic cultures tend to be higher on these lists than less individualistic cultures. Here are the results of a recent study that investigated this concept. So across 33 nations, individualistic countries tend to report higher life satisfaction than less individualistic countries. And what you can see here, IDS, is basically individualism and life satisfaction. You can see here 0.325 is a positive correlation between those two constructs. So if we think about this, is it maybe, perhaps, there's a characteristic of individualism that kind of sets the stage for somebody being more happy, more satisfied with their life. But another interpretation of these data is that it is a factor of how you measure happiness or life satisfaction. If you recall, the way that life satisfaction is typically measured in these global level studies is by asking this question in more or less the following terms. How happy are you with your current life? That includes your life satisfaction, your frequency of positive emotions, and the infrequency of your negative emotions. But what if you ask the question a bit differently? What if you ask the question, how happy are you and your family combined as a unit? If you ask that kind of question, you're asking more about this interdependent type of happiness, not this independent happiness. You're thinking about how you are with the group, your in-group, that is most important to you. And here we can think about these following components within this interdependent form of happiness: interpersonal harmony, ordinariness, quiescence. And this is a scale, this interdependent happiness scale, recently developed by Hitoko and Uchido in the Journal of Happiness Studies. And what they demonstrated in their paper was the strong reliability of the items that they included within this scale. And here are some of the items that are included in each of these scales that can be used to measure happiness. In the independent happiness, this satisfaction with life scale, which has been used in many global level studies, some of the items include, in most ways, My life is close to my ideal. The conditions of my life are excellent. I am satisfied with my life. So far, I have gotten the important things I want in life. If I could change my life over, I would change almost nothing. Some of the items that are found in the interdependent happiness scale are: I believe that I and those around me are happy. I make significant others happy. Although it is quite average, I live a stable life. I believe my life is just as happy as that of others around me. I believe I have achieved the same standard of living as those around me. So the question arises is, if we ask these questions of life satisfaction, trying to measure how satisfied people are around the world, but we use these two different approaches, will individualistic cultures still find themselves on top? Or will it be contingent upon the way that we measure life satisfaction? And so we performed this following study. I'm a member of this international effort. I am the United States representative. And here, 12 countries were included. That included a total of 2,036 respondents. And what was conducted was simply giving these two different life satisfaction scales out to respondents in each of these 12 countries, different cultures. And what was in the critical question here was, do individualistic cultures find themselves to be higher in terms of life satisfaction when we use both of the forms of measurement, or is that relationship affected by how you measure it? And what we found was evidence for the latter. Here is basically a replication of that prior study, that when we measure this independent form of happiness, indeed, it's positively associated with individualism of a particular culture. On the other hand, when we use the approach interdependent happiness and associate that with individualism, that effect is no longer significant. So this is a preliminary study, of course. It only includes 12 countries, and we're currently increasing the scale of this investigation. There are many countries that are being included. While I've been in Bhutan, we've been able to collect a small group of data addressing the same question, but just on a larger scale. Another question that we can pose in terms of culture and social and emotional things is, how within the world may it be different that people interpret emotional expressions? And so smiling is an obvious one, right? With smiling across the world is a positive social gesture. However, people across the world may interpret or judge the other characteristics of people that are smiling differently according to your cultural background. In this study, my colleague Kuba Chris posed this, provided images of people smiling and told participants that research shows that people can quite accurately evaluate others based on their looks. Can you help us rate some faces? And what was asked was for each participant to evaluate how intelligent you believe that this person who is smiling is. So not how much are they smiling, how much are they happy, but how intelligent you think they are. And the other question was, how honest do you think that these smiling faces are? And so here we're getting at what other types of information does smiling convey around the world? And so here, this study is a large-scale study of over 5,000 participants in 44 countries. And here are some of the results, where what was found was indeed that countries did differ in terms of their evaluation of intelligence of smiling faces. We can see here are countries on the high end that evaluated these smiling faces as being more intelligent, while these countries on the low end evaluated smiling faces as less intelligent. Here are some just examples of some of the highest countries and some of the lowest countries. Again, there was variation in terms of how honest smiling faces were evaluated across the world. Here are some examples of countries that reported the faces to be, smiling faces to be highly honest, and countries that reported smiling faces to be less honest. Well, so we see this variation, but what does it mean? Are there some characteristics of these countries that render them to evaluate faces as either being more intelligent or more honest or less so in either scenario? And what was used as a characteristic in this investigation were two characteristics. One is uncertainty avoidance. And you can think about uncertainty avoidance of as a characteristic of a particular culture or society. As a culture, if a culture is high on uncertainty avoidance, then people tend to avoid risk and uncertainty and go through a lot of behaviors to ensure that tomorrow is predictable. On the other hand, the other factor that was used to explain some of the variation in the evaluation of faces was corruption index. So that's how much corruption people seem to experience and perceive within their given society. And what we see here is two significant associations such that cultures that were higher in uncertainty avoidance tended to evaluate smiling faces as more intelligent. On the other hand, countries that were higher in corruption tended to evaluate smiling faces as less honest. So here's an image to just try to make this clear. For uncertainty avoidance, so you remember here, countries that are high on uncertainty avoidance go through effort to make sure that tomorrow is predictable. Tomorrow is predictable, things are relatively stable. And on the other hand, countries that are low on uncertainty avoidance, tomorrow is unknown, and we are okay with taking risks and accepting uncertainty. And what we see here is that these countries that are higher in uncertainty avoidance evaluate the smiling faces as more intelligent. And the interpretation of this finding is that if we know that tomorrow is certain, we know pretty much what's going to go on, there's room to smile. It's okay. Things are safe. We're going to be okay tomorrow. We know what's going to go on. On the other hand, if things are relatively unstable, we're not really sure what's going to go on tomorrow, why are you smiling? Why are you smiling? And if you're conveying an emotion that is inconsistent to the context in your environment, then that may be deemed as unintelligent. On the other hand, the relationship with corruption is such that if there's a lot of corruption in your society and then you see somebody smiling, you may interpret that as being less honest. And I've thought about the following example, that if I go to a used car salesman, I'm trying to buy my used car, and the used car salesman just keeps on smiling at me. I may think that person's maybe a little dishonest with me. However, if I go to my respected religious figure and my religious leader is smiling at me, I don't think I don't suspect that person is corrupt, and I would therefore interpret that smiling face as being honest. So Together, these findings provide some empirical evidence to this differentiation between valuing uniqueness versus harmony, these experiments with these abstract figures and the pens at the airport. There's also evidence that the way that we think about happiness, well-being, and life satisfaction across the world depends on how we're measuring it, how we're thinking about it. And lastly, that the interpretation of smiling faces is associated with these characteristics that may differentiate cultures, such as uncertainty avoidance and corruption. So next, I'd like to describe some ideas that I have about the way that this type of information can be used for us as educators, and why educate this kind of stuff. Some of the goals in the class that I have been teaching, cultural psychology, at my home institution, are to increase knowledge of the variety of psychological phenomenon around the world, to promote mutual understanding, that you can read all day in the news about what's going on across the world, but if you simply talk to somebody who is from a different cultural background or think about really what their day-to-day life is, perhaps there'll be an increase in mutual understanding as a result. And lastly, to simply encourage curiosity. I think that that's an important thing for me that I think about in a variety of classes that I teach, is to simply have students ask more questions, to develop the behavior, the habit of being lifelong learners, that it's not simply a result that being here in class is not just being, isn't just a momentary phenomenon of learning. That we are trying, the more we learn about these concepts, I think usually the more questions arise. And I hope that as a result of teaching these type of classes, that is one of the outcomes. Some of the themes that we spend a great deal of time on in these classes are thinking about collective versus individualistic cultures, posing thought questions such as what sorts of issues may arise if an individualistic-minded person finds themselves living within a collectivist culture and vice versa. Models and stages of acculturation, what sorts of things, what sorts of struggles occur when people find themselves in a new culture? What are the difficulties? What are the ways that tends to occur? Different gender roles, the differentiation between patriarchal versus matriarchal societies, differences and similarities. And so already I've been speaking for a few minutes now, and I've focused quite a bit on what's different within our world. But I think what is also very illuminating is what's similar. That you can have these ideas that, oh, that place must be so different, that person must be so different because they look a different way, they sound a different way. But actually talking to somebody and learning about what their life may be like, I think often results in the learning of the similarities that bring people together, the common values that occur across the world. We spend time with domestic race and ethnicity issues, and the class that I currently teach at University of Georgia is within the psychology department. So many students are aspiring psychologists, and so we discuss clinical psychology to some extent. That includes the differences across the world in terms of the incidence of different forms of psychopathology, as well as how understanding somebody's cultural background is a valuable tool, valuable skill to have when conducting psychotherapy. If you know where they're coming from, if you know a bit about how a particular condition or particular type of social or emotional construct is often represented in a particular culture, perhaps you'd be able to provide treatment in a more effective way. One of the central parts of this class consists of an interview with a person who has spent over 50% of their time outside of the United States. And so this is a class within the United States, and the interview is designed so that students actually learn some information about a different culture and what the experiences were like transitioning from one culture to another. And as in practice, the way that this interview is conducted or designed is that we come up with, that I provide the students 10 standard questions to ask the person that they're interviewing. Together as a class, we develop 10 further questions collectively, and then 10 questions that they develop as an individual. Here's some examples of questions that we have used in these interviews. Based on your experience, what advice would you give to someone currently considering a move to the United States from the country you moved from? What were your expectations of the United States before you moved here? How, if, has this changed over time? Can you describe what makes someone a good leader? So overall, I found that students found that this was effective. Students did let me know that they enjoyed the process, but also that they often found that this became also in an introspective exercise. That they would be conducting this interview with this person from a different culture, and some things would become clear about themselves, about well, this is the way I actually think about the United States, or this is what I think about as a good leader, and is that really, how much of that is just my independent way of thinking as my own identity, or does it have something to do with my culture? And one other way that I have been involved in educating and thinking about cultural issues with students is in study abroad programs. And so here, this is some data from the Institute of International Education within the United States. And this plot represents the number of study abroad programs in the United States. There's the whole number of, or the number of students in the United States that are choosing to study abroad. And so this is a relatively common phenomenon where students will take either a whole year, semester, or even as short as just a few weeks to go and study in a different country. And the University of Georgia has over 100 study abroad programs. And myself, I've been involved in the UGA Costa Rica program, and more frequently in the UGA Tanzania program, where during the month of May, we take about 20 students to Tanzania, and we hold classes there. And we're going from place to place to place within the country, and we are educating and facilitating curiosity. What I've found is that it is a wonderful situation to be able to educate and to work together with students to be able to facilitate this line of questioning. As soon as students get off of the plane, or maybe even earlier, when they get onto the plane, students become amazingly curious. They're outside of their comfort zone. They're thinking about what's going on. Many of these students that are on these programs, it's been their first time outside of the United States. And they are curious about what's going on. And so often in many classes as a lecturer, it can be challenging to get students to be engaged and to ask questions. That's not the case on these study abroad programs. Students become exuberantly curious, asking question after question after question. And I don't have all the answers, but it's a joy to be a part of and try to help them try to figure it out. So what is the motivation for many of these students to study abroad? Why do they do it? One is, of course, language. If they're trying to learn a different language, it's great to be immersed in that language for a prolonged period of time. It's valuable for students that are considering international level of business to think about international business strategies. Those students that are interested in international relations, this is an effective way. Another motivation that many students have is that they're considering doing something internationally after college, may it be an NGO, and they're using this as a bit of a testing ground to see if this is something that works well for them. And lastly, there may be this effect of studying abroad that results in the development of the ability to be cognizant, observant, and conscious of similarities and differences among and between cultural groups, this construct of cultural awareness. And so maybe by studying abroad, students are becoming more culturally aware as a result of these experiences. And one way that this concept of cultural awareness can be measured is through a variety of different surveys, questionnaires. Cross-cultural adaptability inventory, the intercultural development inventory, the intercultural sensitivity index. And here are some of the items that are included in one of the most commonly used cultural awareness measures, the cross-cultural adaptability inventory. It includes 4 factors: emotional resilience. I have ways to deal with the stresses of new situations. I can enjoy relating to all kinds of people. I try to understand people's thoughts and feelings when I talk to them. In personal autonomy, I feel free to maintain my personal values even among those who do not share them. And so this is a survey, a questionnaire that can be used to quantify how culturally aware somebody is. And so the question arises, does studying abroad result in measurable changes in cultural awareness? And I recently performed this quantitative review of several studies that have sought to understand this issue. And what you can see here is each of these studies used a variety of different techniques. These are all studies that are from the United States, and these are students that are going from a United States institution to a country outside of the United States and for some period of time. And what you can see here is a list of different countries that these students went to. You can also see the duration, number of days that the students spent outside of the country. The number of students in the study abroad group, or if there was a control group, a group of students that stayed at their domestic institution that the results were compared to, the number of students in that group, the type of measure that was used, and the effect size. Oh, and the type of comparison that was used, either a within subject design. So in within subject design, students were given this questionnaire prior to the study abroad experience, and then were given the questionnaire at the end of the study abroad experience. And a statistical comparison was performed between those two measurements. In between subject designs, students that studied abroad were given the questionnaire after they returned from their experience, and those data were compared to questionnaires that were given to students that remained at their home institution, in most cases studying the same type of thing. And lastly, we have the effect sizes of how much improvement and change there was in cultural awareness. And so we can see here is that there is some evidence that this works in terms of an increase in cultural awareness. However, there's a lot of limitations that are important to consider. First and foremost, there's just a variety in a whole lot of things across these studies. There's a variety in different countries that students are going to. There's a variety in the number of students, and more often than not, the number of students included in these studies is relatively small. And most importantly, there's a selection bias here. Students that are choosing to study abroad are probably the ones that are more open and more culturally aware just to begin with. And there's evidence to support that. It's difficult to assign students, here, congratulations, you're part of this experiment, you're studying abroad, and here, congratulations, you're part of this experiment, you're not. So that doesn't occur, and so those type of characteristics that differentiate the participants in these studies need to be considered. But overall, there is some evidence that this works, and hopefully that as a result of this type of work, that institutions can think about ways that they can increase opportunity for students to do these type of things, because this often costs quite a bit of money, and there's disparity in who for one finds themselves in college, particularly in the United States, but within college, who has the financial resources to be able to choose to do this. So hopefully, if we see as educators that this is working, this is an effective way to increase cultural awareness, and that cultural awareness is important for being an effective member of a company or any type of institution that somebody chooses to work in, then perhaps we can work together to be able to increase these opportunities for students to do these type of things. So by the numbers, thinking about these findings together, we see that there are an increase in the number of people that are finding themselves in different cultures and in multicultural scenarios. There's evidence that social cognition and emotion processing differs among the world. The concepts of uniqueness and harmony are thought of differently in collective versus individualistic cultures. Life satisfaction is different across cultures and countries, but it depends on how we measure it. And the way that smiling faces are interpreted may be contingent upon how much uncertainty avoidance tends to occur in a particular culture and how much corruption occurs in a particular culture. And lastly, we can use this information, hopefully, to be able to educate our students in cultural psychology classes domestically and via study abroad programs. So here, this is what has brought me here. I'm currently a Fulbright scholar in the Kingdom of Bhutan, where this has been a wonderful experience for me, learning about the culture of Bhutan. The population is relatively small to many of Bhutan's neighboring countries, a total of approximately 750,000 people. Density is also relatively low relative to its neighboring countries. And what has more or less put the Kingdom of Bhutan on the map is this notion of gross national happiness. And this is an initiative that the King of Bhutan initiated in 1972 to kind of stand against this concept that is thought of worldwide of gross domestic product, that we measure the success of a particular country based on how much money flows in and out. And gross domestic happiness suggests that a better metric to consider about the success of a particular country is to think about how satisfied people are within their country. And so in practice, how this works in Bhutan is every few years, a countrywide survey is conducted called the Gross National Happiness Index. And in this survey, there includes questions about emotional states, but also about access to healthcare, spirituality, trust in the government, pollution. So a very holistic approach to the well-being of their citizens. And this is, in practice, it is something that is very special about Bhutan. In religious practice, it's largely Buddhist and a smaller percentage Hindu. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone, Stuti, and also this quote from a student that was on the last study abroad program to Tanzania that I was on. When she came back, she evaluated the program and said that I would like to work with people from different cultures. It's refreshing to meet people who have completely different perspectives than yours. I also want to keep climbing mountains in the literal sense. Part of the program includes climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, so that's part of it. So thank you very much for all of your time and attention. It's been a great pleasure for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brian. It was very insightful, and I would just like to start the conversation just by looking at the recent atrocities that happened in London. And when you were talking about the cultural awareness, I think one of the key things that the conversation that is starting is when people are not open and they don't have the understanding about the cultures and the openness. And I think what your research was talking about is also related to that. What's your view on those things?
Yes, I agree. I think that the likelihood that we can come up with solutions and build bridges only comes with asking questions and also being open about ourselves. And I think that that it's very easy to view something on the TV or read something in the newspaper about a particular group of people and to put them in a box. Yes. From many personal experiences that I've been to different parts of my own country and met people with different accents and just on the surface very different ways. And there are lines that are drawn within our society, may them be from our media, that characterizes these people from this particular way, and may they have one particular characteristic that I don't really agree with. That may be the case, okay, but often I think we can make the error of generalizing that particular way of thinking to other things. And you don't know until you ask. You don't know until you ask. So I think I read these stories and I'm aware of all these violent things that are occurring. I hope that we can talk through it as opposed to doing talk through and ask questions with people that we disagree with.
Yeah. To increase the understanding about the others, not the in-group, but then I suppose the out-group.
And to find similarities.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Everybody wants to have a freedom and being able to think for themselves. People want I think everybody wants a comfortable life for their family. I think those are universals, and I don't think we can. We're going to make much progress if we put people in boxes that those type of shared values don't exist.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was wondering in your presentation that like when you, especially when you had this scale for happiness to find out how happy people are, then did you also consider the people's, their spirituality or religion? Now, I think in Bhutan you mentioned that also plays a very, very important part, but in other countries, especially in Europe and in the Western countries, it's religion and the one's spirituality, does it play a role when you say the person is happy or not happy?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the simplest way that the first step in this development of this interdependent happiness scale was to focus on the family. Because if you ask people, some other data indicate that if you ask people across the world, what are some of the factors, the things in your life that affect your happiness the most? Family comes up repeatedly on the top of that list across the world. And so that was the first place to go with this interdependent happiness scale. However, I think that other characteristics that bind people and their communities are relevant. How we could pose the question a bit differently and ask people, how happy are you with your particular religious group, or how happy does that affect, how much does your religious beliefs affect your day-to-day level of happiness? I think that'd be a good next step. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Brand, there's just one thing. I don't know whether this question is appropriate to this situation. That when you look into people's happiness, I found that mainly consider the facial expressions. Communication point of view, this is actually a non-verbal way of communicating the feelings with somebody. Desmond Morris says facial expressions is not very trustworthy entity. I mean, think about the other body language, hand signals, the trunk signals, the leg signals, and all those things that he says more trustworthy than the face. Is there a way to check other, non-verbal components?
Yeah. We have a really amazing ability to get a lot of social information very quickly. May it not be always accurate, but we form impressions very quickly. And there are ways that our brain can take just dots moving in a way that suggests a human body is walking. And they're just dots that are moving along. And there are parts of the brain that indicate that very quickly. And they're in that same that same part of network within our brain also codes social cues, movements of our body in as being approach or avoidance. Is this something that I should be trying to be fearful of? Should I go away? Very quickly. And I think that likely, in terms of timing, that these types of judgments and characteristics happen on just as fast of a scale as we do with facial expressions. But that could be, that I suspect that there is evidence that there are cultural differences in how body language is communicated as well. I don't know those patterns, but I suspect that there are.
You take a country as a sample, within the country you can see the variation, heterogeneity.
Agreed.
For example, in this forum, you can see the different phases.
Agreed.
And non-phases behavior.
Yeah.
Can you conclude by taking one and generalize country appear like this?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think these are generalizations. You're completely right. And I can speak from the country that I currently live in, the United States. There's a great amount of diversity and differences in the way that people go about their lives. So just the only way that we can be able to get a little bit better confidence in terms of our results is to study more people and to ensure that within our studies we're getting a diverse sample. Another limitation of many of these studies is that they include college students. They solely include college students. And so here we're getting a particular breed of people, right? And so, this is the best we got at this time. But I agree with you that it's a limitation that we can do better. Yes, please.
My area is economics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at the history, all the worlds, originally they were collectively took a decision. Originally. Now they are towards the individualistic center, self-centered world. Have captured those things. Now even you label today world was like individualistic and collaborative, but world is moving towards centralized society. In the future, I don't see this collaborative concept, working together concept. It's my personal one. Because I may be biased. My area is economics. So if you look at the history of the economics, how people behave are more or less centralized, individualistic versus collaborative. I may be wrong, but it's my curiosity.
Yeah, well, I think likely it may have quite a bit to do with money. That individualistic cultures tend to focus on these notions of GDP more, and this notion of competition is valued so much that if we take life satisfaction off the table, there is an association between individualism and economic prosperity. And so with that comes influence. And if that influence is going to affect, and I believe has affected, the promotion of collectivism within the world. I think that's the case. That's not any. We don't know, but that has no. We can't speak of any characteristic of how satisfied people are, but that money does talk.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the interesting talk. I had a question, but I need to kind of think it out aloud, so I hope it makes sense. So a lot of what you were talking about was as an American, understanding the rest of the world, kind of. And as Sri Lankans, Sri Lankan psychologists, excuse me, we have a bit of a problem with psychology, I think, in the sense of it's very hard for us to figure out where we fit in. As teachers, we don't really understand how to teach psychology to make it applicable to our students, you know. And part of my issue, one of the issues that I struggle with a lot, is kinds of, like for example, if you take cross-cultural psychology, it is to a great extent US or Western Europe-centered. A lot of the questions are their questions, they're not our questions, you know. So they're meant to it's almost like a new version of Orientalism, you know. We are the other, so to understand you, you have to study us, kind of. I feel there is a bit of that. And also, if you take psychology as a whole, I think we do not do enough of talking about our shared history in colonialism and our shared, not shared, but differences in resources between Western places and in countries like ours. So, for example, for that gentleman's question just now, I think that you can understand that in terms of sort of the neoliberal policies that are often almost coerced into our system through international bodies like the World Bank and things like that. And psychology as a discipline is not able to understand these effects or how they affect our experience, psychological experiences. So that's like a very complicated kind of comment question. But I do want to know where you would locate yourself within such a, in your experience as a teacher and a researcher, how would you respond to a critique like that of psychology?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I thank you for your comments. I think as for me as an individual and as me as a teacher and researcher, that finding out this information that things are different according to where you're at, I think that notion can be universal. That sure, the questions that are arising, that are many of these empirical studies that I presented, are being posed from a Western individualistic grounding. However, on the umbrella of that is that the way that we think, the way that we feel about our world there isn't just one fundamental truth that just everybody just has. And if we're trying to understand human behavior and trying to understand and try to build a connection with somebody, may it be in a classroom, may it be as a clinical psychologist with a therapist and patient relationship, then being open to the idea that there isn't just one fundamental truth is, I think, is valuable, and that it has to do with where you come from and has to do with the way that your experiences has shaped your perspective of the world. And I hope that may the questions be rooted in Western thought, in Western individualism, to be frank, that there's still some product that encourages this thinking that this isn't the only way. I mean, we could rewind the clock maybe 40, 50 years when cross-cultural psychology as a pure field on its own didn't really exist. And then there were people and during this time, psychology just as its own was basically a field. And at that point, people were just trying to just demonstrate here, this is just fundamental, this is the way that psychopathology develops, and this is how you treat it in a very kind of black and white way. But I hope that having cross-cultural as its own field, and also having cross-cultural ask questions about psychopathology, about education, ask questions about all types of things that are important to all of our lives, that hopefully that we can think about we can take these, accept the differences as opposed to relying on the findings that have been produced from a Western psychology field as fact.
I think we can continue the conversations if the time permits,
Yeah.
but I think we're about to close this lecture, and I invite Mr. Angarandaniya to deliver the vote of thanks.
On behalf of the Department of Psychology and Counseling, it is my pleasant task to deliver the vote of thanks. Firstly, our distinguished guest lecturer, Dr. Brian Haas, Assistant Professor of Psychology at the University of Georgia. Thank you for accepting our invitation and for delivering such an insightful lecture today, and we look forward to having you with us again. We wish to thank Professor J.C.N. Rajendra of the International Relations Unit and all his staff for coordinating today's event. Thank you for providing us with this rare opportunity. We also wish to thank the Director of the Center for Educational Technology and Media, Dr. Jayantha Vattavitanage, and staff, and the IT department for their support in making this event possible. A special mention must be made of our Dean, Professor Gaya Ranawaka, and the staff at the Faculty of Health Sciences for their presence and support for today's lecture. I would be failing in my duty if I did not thank our head of the Department of Psychology and Counseling, Dr. Ghani Tamaki, for initiating this endeavor and making this event a reality. We truly appreciate your effort. We also wish to thank the psychology practitioners who are present here today for graciously accepting our invitation and supporting our endeavor. Last but not the least, we wish to thank the OUSL staff for joining us today. Your presence and support is deeply appreciated. Thank you.